Okay, this is a snapshot of Sabbath school here today, this morning. There were 101 total adults on the premises at 10:23. 101. 37% of those 101, I guess, were over the age of 60. 37%. 15% were in kids' Sabbath school. There were 12 adults and the babies, and there were 3 in primary. 13% were outside who had no intentions of coming inside. Some in the foyer and some just talking out in the car park and out here. 13%. And I estimate that there were 14% in the married age group of the 25 to 40-year-olds, and you could have really counted on one hand the number of college students or young adults under the age of 24. Are you seeing a picture quickly emerge there when you look at it? We are a church with many in Sabbath school at the beginning and the end, and in the middle there's a great lack. And if you really analyse what's in the middle, you would find most were migrants to New Zealand and not Kiwis. Not Kiwis. So that's a very interesting thing. What it's really saying is our Sabbath school's not relevant for that middle age group, particularly New Zealanders. And that's the bulk of our population. Next slide, Kate. Oh, let me do this while we're waiting, to make sure you're all with me. When I say clap, I want you to clap. Clap. Oh, man. Did you hear that, Mark? It was shocking. Imagine if I said we're going to conquer Mount Everest and that was the response. Some of you didn't even clap. Some of you clapped and about 30 seconds later, did he say clap? And then there was this muted clap and some went like this. Did he really mean clap? What a disgraceful effort if we want to all be together. So what I want to do is get you to stand on your feet. I'm going to have to give you some coaching because part of being a Sabbath school class is doing things together in unison. So what I want you to do is I don't want you to clap until I say clap. And I'm going to give you some coaching and I'm going to show you how we can all come together because that's what Sabbath school's meant to be about. So get your hands ready. 1, 2, 3, clap. Sit down. Sit down. All right, you got the lesson. As a Sabbath, and I'm particularly talking to Sabbath school teachers, it's not what you say, it's what you do. It's who you are that's absolutely vital as a teacher. You can use all the words in the world, but it's what you do and who you are. Like I can do this. I am so excited to be here with you this afternoon. I would have given up anything. You are the smartest group that I've ever spoken to this year. Do you believe me? No. Absolutely not, because it's what I do, not what I say, that really has the power of a teacher. Next slide. Okay, I want you to tell me, you've got to choose one. I want a show of hands. What is the best way to help a student succeed in school? Number 1, a highly qualified teacher. In other words, a PhD in a subject will do a better job of teaching than a BA. A highly gifted teacher, where they just have the natural ability to teach. A great curriculum like our Sabbath school lesson pamphlet. Excellent learning resources like access to the internet and getting stuff there. An excellent environment, having a conducive environment, classroom, or motivated students. Okay, you've got to choose one. Hands up. Who thinks a highly qualified teacher? Excellent, sister. Who thinks a highly gifted teacher? You can only choose one. Good, Ian. Okay. Who thinks a great curriculum? Who thinks an excellent learning resources like the internet? Excellent. Who thinks an excellent environment? Who thinks motivated students? None of them. Next slide. This is what research shows conclusively again and again in education. The importance of high-quality relationships and interactions between teachers and students. The connection between the teacher and the student. The bridge between the teacher and the student is recognised by teachers and research studies again and again as the number one ingredient needed for a student to make the maximum use of his capabilities or hers. It's the connection. It's that relationship. It's that relationship dynamic, not how gifted the teacher is, how clever he is, how good the Sabbath school lesson is. It's that relationship between teacher and class member that's going to have the greatest impact for the kingdom of God. Okay, I want you to turn to your partner who's sitting right next door to you or behind you, and I want you to tell them where I was born. And also, what's my favourite food? Off you go. Where was I born and what's my favourite food? All right. Here are the 4 questions, and we've got to go quick. The first question is why? Why is it important for you as a Sabbath school teacher to know about strengthening relationships in the Sabbath school class? I have 2 good reasons, aside from what secular research tells us. 2 is God says so. And I love, Mark, I prepared this weeks ago now, and I love that the very day I'm presenting it, the Sabbath school lesson's on John 17. How good is that? That they, you and I, may be as we are one. If you truly can understand what Jesus means by that oneness. You know what he's saying, Brian? He's saying that he wants the relationship between you and I and Carol is to be the same in the Trinity. Imagine if we really got a grip of what that truly would be in a Sabbath school. That our oneness is so close that it's the same as between Jesus and the Father and the Spirit. Amazing. And the second thing is, the Bible is really a book of stories. Genesis begins with, let us create man in our image. There's the relationship beginning in the beginning. It is not good that man is alone. Relationships. The whole of Genesis is really a story of one man's relationship and his family with God, that man being Abraham. What about David and his band of mighty warriors? That David he wasn't alone there when Saul was hounding him. There were 300 or 400, was it? Mighty men surrounding him. Jesus and his team. Even Jesus knew he couldn't do his mission without having relationships close around. So why are relationships important in Sabbath school? Because it's the divine mandate that nothing is done in God's family without it being highly personal and intimate. With us with God and us with each other. So the second thing is, what? And I've got to tell you this quickly because there's a whole heap of research there that actually backs this up. What we've discovered is our human brains cannot optimally develop unless they get the right interaction with another human being. It's called attachment. And if people don't get the right attachment at a young age, it rewires their brain entirely different to those who do get the right nurturing environment. The good thing is you're never too old or too late to get it rewired again, and we're constantly getting our brains rewired if we come into the right relationships with people. Our brain is formed through relationships. The brain has 2 parts, left and right hemisphere, but I want you to give you another look at it. There's an upstairs brain, that's the thinking brain, the cerebral part that's very thin, where we think and reason and use language. And the downstairs brain is our emotions. In a very healthy church community, those 2 must be linked and joined together for people to be healthy in a church. So if you've got a church that's always upstairs brain and neglecting the downstairs brain, you've got a dysfunctional system operating and people are not going home healed or repaired. If you've got a church that's only in the downstairs brain and to experience with no thinking ability and reasoning ability, you've got an impaired church as well. God's church is when these two hemispheres, the thinking brain and the feeling brain, come together, integrate together, and work with each other, with the thinking brain controlling the feeling brain, but both working together. The primary need for human beings, I've discovered, and Maslow got it terribly wrong. If you ever hear of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, got it terribly wrong. The most basic need of a human being, we know now from neuroscience, is closeness, attachment, being physically close to someone to protect us and take care of us. Next slide, Kate. Okay, what am I passionate about? And how did I meet my wife, Kay? Take a minute to the person next door to you and share that. What am I passionate about and how did I meet my wife? Yeah, this is about me. I'm not worried about you. This is about me. What is Ian passionate about? Me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not worried about what you're passionate about. I want you to know what I'm passionate about. And how did I meet Kay, my wife, not how you met your wife. See, I told you my ears aren't big enough. Okay, why am I asking these questions? To know me is to love me. If you know where I was born, you know why I've got some of the idiosyncrasies I have, why I've got some of the unique qualities I have, why I do what I do, because where I was born has an indelible effect on me. You ought to know how I met my wife. She's a lot younger than me, and there's a story there. You ought to know that. All my family know how I met my wife, because we're family. And why shouldn't you know it if we truly are family? Amen. See? That's what Sabbath school can do. The power of relationships. Next one, Kate. People are coming to our Sabbath schools broken, bruised and wounded. And it's causing what I call shark music. So not everyone is coming to Sabbath school hearing Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. And if they do, they're going, oh, isn't it great? Da, 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 da. Many of us are coming to Sabbath school with shark music. Da-dum, da-dum. And trust me, if you've watched Jaws, you're very careful when you get in the water. And if you've got shark music, these emotions that are deeply, deeply hurtful, playing in your life, they do not turn off when you drive into the Royal Oak car park. They are alive as much in this church as when you left home. And if our Sabbath schools could become places where we turned off the shark music, and it only happens through relationships. And I can't tell you how to do it today, sorry. I've got all these hows. They're in a handout here. Have a look at it. This is what I've decided. If you get the why right, that you truly believe relationships are everything, just do whatever and you'll find it works perfectly fine. But if you try and do relationships, it'll simply become a technique unless it's actually embedded in your heart that people really are the apple of God's heart. Next one, Kay. Let me do this. Okay, what have I got here? Hand. What hand? Right hand? Okay, all hold up your right hand. Okay, put it down. What have I got here? Left hand. Okay, so hold up both of your hands. So what have we got here? Right hand, and here? Left hand. Okay, I want you to put both hands down. Now I want you to hold up your right hand. Hold it up. Now I want you to put them together, the other hand, and I want you, with your right hand, hold it up again, the right hand. Okay, put it back. Push as hard as you can with your right hand. You know, this is what I see happening. Who told you to block with the left hand? Did I say stop with your left hand? This is all you needed to do. And if you get relationships right, you will find that life just goes like this. There's not this block all the time. Oh, we've got to get people motivated. How are we going to get more coming to Sabbath school? Oh, we've got to get more people studying the Bible. We've got to do this and all these blocks. And oh, we made some victory today. Oh, no, this week we're back here again. We've got all these blocks there. But relationships. Okay, Kate, move it quick. This is what Sabbath school's meant to do. It takes people who are broken, bruised and battered, or even if they've got their life together, it's like an acorn, because this is Royal Oak. Always look at this carpet and let this remind you. We come here as acorns. Next one. Then in the master's hand, through the Sabbath school teacher, he takes that seed of ours. Next one. And it becomes a little sapling, develops into a plant with leaves. Next one. Next one. And ultimately, through Sabbath school, with relationships being the centre, you produce huge oak trees. And even when time isn't as good as what it could always be, next one, even when there's times that are tough, it still looks beautiful if you've been growing in Sabbath school. This is what I found in our Royal Oak Church. Oh, I've been through some terrible Sabbath schools. Boring as anything. I don't know why I've been there. The reason I used to go to them was because I'm a cultural Adventist. And you just have to go to Sabbath school. But they were boring, and I'd go home saying, man, that's the biggest waste of time I've ever been to. And then you can go to a Sabbath school where they have a good discussion and they have good things, and suddenly a bit of structure comes and you go, oh, that's pretty good. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And then you go to Mark Ryan's class where he really values and honours people. He did it beautifully this morning. And oh, what a difference. What a difference. So the choice is yours as a Sabbath school teacher. What do you want? A boring Sabbath school class? Do you want one where people just go home with a bit of structure? Or do you want true life to be infused into it? That's relationships. I've got here 2 things I want you to have. A summary of my notes, which are very extensive, and also a little book on parenting, but it's got all the principles of why relationships are so important.
Okay.
God bless you.
All right. What I want to talk about is how I facilitate. It may not be the best way. It may not suit everybody. It may not be the only way, but it's the way I do it, and there's no real science to it. When I thought about it, there's no real mechanism I could write down and say, well, this is what exactly you have to do, and if you do these, you'll be right. So what I've done is I've started with, no, I've gone the wrong way there, haven't I? Nope. What have I got here? There we go. I've titled it Leading from Behind. That sounds a bit like an oxymoron. But I wanted to paint the picture that our class is more like a large ship, and the facilitator is the rudder. And if you think of a rudder, the rudder is where? At the front or at the back? At the back. How big is the rudder relative to the ship? Very small. And yet, without the rudder, the ship can't go anywhere with any definite direction. So leading from behind is what I've titled my presentation this afternoon. That without leading from the front, without being at the bow of the ship, you can still guide your discussion. You can still guide, you will facilitate from the back, facilitating with questions. Now, the way I like to think that our class runs is, if you can imagine going to somebody's place for dinner, and you sit down, have a wonderful meal. You finish the meal, and then you start talking. And you talk about politics, and you talk about sports, and you talk about all sorts of stuff. There's no one person that leads the discussion. Everybody has their say. Everybody has their input. Everybody has a laugh. And that's what I would like to see our Sabbath school. That's how I think of our Sabbath school. It's everyone having a say without anybody feeling constrained, feeling that they can't say what's on their mind, feeling that they can't open up about the topic or about themselves, and that if they did, that they would not be criticized for it. Okay, so for me, that's important, is that when you come to a Sabbath school class, and I think it's unfair that Ian has singled out my class, because I think there are other classes that do equally well in different ways, different styles. But that in each class, I think there should be, it's welcoming, and that we all should be able to input and gain from having being in a Sabbath school class. Oops, let's go back one. So this is what I've taken a sort of a food theme. I like food. Food and I have a very good relationship. And hopefully today we'll be able to learn three things, or under three topics. The recipe, how to prepare to facilitate as I do. The second is the meal, leading out, what happens in the class. And thirdly, things that we should ponder, digesting the meal, if you like. So the first thing I would like to say under the recipe is we've got to clarify what it is that is the idea. When you read your lessons pamphlet, sometimes if you are just reading it, it's hard to get what's coming through. You read it and you read it again, it doesn't seem to come through. And it's a lesson that I've learned in life, and I try to teach our children that. The best way to learn is to try and teach. If you're trying to understand maths and your teacher's not very clear on what the topic is, take time to learn and then try to teach somebody else that maths. Because in trying to teach, you're seeing they're struggling the way you would have done. And in learning how to convey that, you actually learn the topic better. So for me, part of my learning teaching is part of my learning experience. So you've got to try and clarify what the big idea is. I've taken here a sample from next week's lesson, from Sunday's lesson. And the way that Mark Finley writes it is so interesting, because just about every sentence he writes can become a theme in its own right. And if you just take a read at that, all true spirituality is focused on knowing God and doing His will. That alone could be a theme for discussion. Then he goes on, any so-called revival that focuses on experience rather than commitment to obey God's will misses the mark completely. That in itself could be a different topic to talk about. And in each one of those sentences could be a theme for discussion. So for me, I read that and I think, well, how am I going to get to the core of what Mark Finley's trying to say in the lesson with all these different topics going through? So the first thing I have to do is clarify the idea. The second thing is I have to do, I've called it stirring the pot because it's a cooking theme. But you take the theme and then you try and work out what sort of question can I ask that's going to provoke debate. Not just discussion, but debate. Maybe have disagreement. There's nothing wrong with disagreement as long as we've got a way of getting around that. So I try to prepare that so stir the pot a bit. So here's a possible discussion question that I've taken from that first portion that we read and tried to focus the discussion around revival and the experience and what Mark Finley, our writer, was trying to say. What is wrong with revival that is based on our experience? Okay, you look at that question, you think, okay, fair enough. But that question is a leading question, isn't it? What's wrong with saying what is wrong? Let's get some feedback. Exactly. It implies there's something wrong. So in the way I phrase the question, I'm leading people to think there's something wrong with your experience as part of revival. Is that what Mark Finley said? No, it's not. He said if we focus just on experience, then there's something wrong. It's a bit like what Ian said, the upstairs and downstairs. If we focus just on our experience, on our emotions, our feelings, and miss out on the intellectual part of it, we could be missing out on quite a bit, and vice versa, of course. So it's important for us, in stirring the pot, that we ask these provocative questions and then invite people to answer. So we'll get a little bit more into how we want to do that. We want to plan the path of where we're going to take the discussion. So we're still preparing the discussion. We have a fair idea of what topics we want to deal with, and we want to plan how we go through that. And it might be that in reading a week's lesson, we find that Sunday's lesson or Sabbath afternoon's lesson doesn't contain too much. But by the time you get to Wednesday's lesson, that's where the meat is. And so you might start with Wednesday and work your way back in the way you discuss things, back to cover Saturday afternoon and Sunday and so forth. But I try at least, to bring the whole thing together, because sometimes you'll find that the meat is not actually until you get to Friday's lesson. And if you spent the whole lesson talking about the lead up and miss the meat, I find we don't always get to the meat question. And I'm using meat here in the sense of the content. All right. So we need to plan the path. And I've just put up here a very quick, some sort of words, little bullet points of how I might, in this case, plan the path for our discussion. We might start with revival, the theme of revival, and then work on to God's word, his will, his spirit, because that's the order it looked like where that was going in that first part. And then we need to guide the course. In other words, we need to work out how we're going to do that. Presenting like this is fairly easy because I can lay down the path and I can follow that path quite easily, and no one's going to stop me. But in a class, it's different. And you can't lay a course and say, that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm exactly going to do this in 5 minutes, that in 10, and finish in 25 minutes. It doesn't happen like that in my class, in our class anyway. So for me, you've got to build into your preparation a little bit of that flexibility, because very often, although you've got the path set and you know where you want to go, sometimes people take you off the path, and they sometimes take you off the path to a more interesting, deeper path that you do need to pursue. I do need to pursue to make sure that we don't miss the point. Okay, I've jumped. Am I playing with this or someone else's? Anyway, okay, this was supposed to come up one bullet point at a time, but we'll cover them all at once. So how do we take the class? How do we lead out in the class? For me, we always start with a question, and then I'll give time for people to think. Sometimes when we facilitate, we ask the question, and then we expect people to answer straight away. We haven't given them time to think. If the question is provocative, people need time to think about it, need to get their ideas straight, and not everybody is willing to speak up. Only those that are willing will speak up. And I think this is another important part in leading out in our classes. Not everybody wants to speak. Some people are quite happy just to sit and listen and learn from others in class. So we don't try to force people to speak. We encourage and we invite, but ultimately it's up to people whether they want to speak and contribute. Let other people help you guide through the lesson. And I'm very, very thankful for those in our class that contribute, that take us off the path, that bring us back onto the path, that enlighten me and in fact really help me understand in many, many different ways. So thank you to those in our class that do that. We do need to acknowledge people's points of view. I've been in classes, not necessarily in Royal Oak, but classes in other churches, where somebody's made a really good point, but because the teacher hasn't factored that into their lesson study, they don't acknowledge it. They don't build on it. And they miss such opportunities, great opportunities, because they haven't focused on what the person said. More, they're focused on what they want to do and hear. We need to seek to understand. You know, there's an old saying, seek to understand more than to be understood. And sometimes we try to force people or encourage people to understand what we're trying, our point of view, and not understand their point of view. I think it's important to do that, to understand what people are trying to say. Now, that's the meal. That's how I would run the class, and I hope that's been helpful. The last one there is stay on track. That was the only thing that's popped up as a separate item, bullet point. Stay on track as much as you can. With our class, I think we could probably do with an hour to an hour and a half for our discussion. But invariably, we have maybe 30 or 40 minutes on Sabbath, and we have to do what we do with that time. And I think we'd do quite well. We could do, and I think it would be nice if we maybe had a meal and had a lesson over Sabbath lunch, something like that. But try and stay on track if you can. Don't forget, just a few reminders, you're dealing with adults that are independent thinkers. If you're going to facilitate, don't be condescending. Accept that other people have different points of views to your own, and maybe they have something to teach you. I certainly learn a lot from the people that speak up in our class. You're to guide, not control. Being an engineer, I like to have control. I like to have certainty in the way I do things. But when it comes to our class, The only certainty is that I'm going to learn. Otherwise, our class goes meandering. And I think some people come to our class and find it unsettling because there doesn't seem to be a single lesson that we're focusing on. There's a whole lot of different points that come from all sorts of angles, from all sorts of different people. So, yeah, I would recommend that if you're going to facilitate a class, guide, not necessarily control. Lead with authority, be confident. Don't lead with your ego. Some people get offended if somebody says something they disagree with. So for me, if you, one of my suggestions would be authoritative in what you say and what you do, but don't lead with your ego. Leave that in your pocket. Deliver and deal with dignity. Deliver your lesson and deal with the people you're dealing with dignity. Don't put down people. You know, they're not there because you're paying them to be there. They're there because they want to be there. They want to learn. And so it's a great opportunity for all to learn, including you as facilitator or me as facilitator. Be vulnerable and be sensitive. By sensitive, I mean be aware that others might have problems and might be dealing with issues that you are not aware of. We all have issues. It doesn't matter who you are, how young or how old, we all have issues that we're dealing with in our lives. But we need to be sensitive to others' issues, people that might be, hurting. We need to be sensitive. And by vulnerability, I mean open yourself up to be hurt, to be criticized, be honest. All of these things, for me, are important in facilitation. So for me, that's basically it. And I hope that you've learned a little bit about how I do it, and that it's not the only way, but it's the way that I've grown to do it, and I hope that it works. Thank you very much.
When I was asked to do this, I said it's probably going to take like 5 minutes, maybe 2, so it won't take very long. How many of you are terrified out of your minds about having to get up and take a Sabbath school? Okay, so I'm talking to like the 5 of you who put your hands up. Everybody else, I'm glad you can just get up and talk. When we were first asked to take Sabbath school, terrified, out of my mind, no idea. I'm still a baby, still learning, and having to run a class was the hardest thing anyone could ever have asked me to do. So what I do is I learn. I think in order to run a class, you have to at least understand a little bit of what you're talking about. So I have to learn the topic every week. I spend hours, days, just trying to get my head around the topic. So I thought I would come and share some resources that I found handy. The circles you can't really see very well on the PowerPoint. Sorry, I'm nervous. You can't really see very well. The dark circle is how much I get when I read the Sabbath school lesson. So that much in the scale of things. So I read through the Sabbath school lesson a few times, try and figure out what it is, have a million questions when I'm reading the lesson. And so I write down my questions. And then I watch YouTube. So internet, best tool ever. Hope Sabbath School. So Derek Morris, the URL for that is hopess.hopetv.org for anybody who's interested. Hope Sabbath School, Derek Morris sticks really closely to the lesson book. That helps me understand a little bit more about what they were saying in the lesson book. So it overlaps a big part of the lesson book and goes a little bit outside. Then after Hope Sabbath School, I watch Central Study Hour, Doug Batchelor. I quite like Doug Batchelor. He's got a lot of stories, a lot of examples, makes it really clear, easy for me to understand, still covers the Sabbath school lesson, goes a little bit more outside of the circle, fills in a little bit more scriptures, Bible verses. Amazingfacts.org for anyone who's interested. So I watch Hope Sabbath School. After that, it's all about God. That's Loma Linda Sabbath School Study. It's a bunch of professors who sit down and discuss the lesson. All of these have their handouts available online for anyone who's interested. So I go through their handouts. What this does for me is it takes my picture that's this big of the topic, so the topic is unity. I maybe know this much. After that, these expand it, so now I know this much. The Sabbath school lesson takes maybe, 10 verses, Bible scripture verses that cover the topic. At the end of watching all of these, I have maybe 40 verses, 40 scriptures on the topic. So for me, I find this helpful, just to understand at least what it's all about. The Christian Trust, I find a good resource. It basically has Bible studies. So on unity, there is a handout that is just Bible verses on unity with questions with some Bible verses that go with that. So thechristiantrust.com. All of this covers the topic that we're studying in the Bible study. Then there's a website or a guy who runs a YouTube channel called Come Let Us Reason Together. I find he sits over here and is probably challenges the way I think of things, because when I look at it, I want to know, what does the Bible have to teach me? And so he talks a little bit more about his application to his situation, and it gets me thinking. And then people in the Sabbath school class who maybe have very different opinions to me, it gets me prepared for that. And then Sabbath School, which is University Sabbath School, it's a bunch of university students who discuss the Sabbath School lesson, and they generally stay on topic as well. So then what I do from that, while I'm listening to everything, I'm frantically writing notes. And if you look through my Sabbath School book, it's just got writing everywhere. Every single bit of page is filled with notes that I've taken. And then what I do at the end of the week is, now I've digested everything, I write all the Bible verses down, every single one that I got from every single one of those websites. If I feel like I still don't know the topic enough, I go to the back of my Bible, I look up every single verse that talks about unity. You don't have to go into so much preparation. I do this because I need to understand it. And because I'm a baby, I'm still learning. This is me learning. Okay. So I write down all the verses, generally not on a typed piece of paper, generally in my Sabbath school book or on post-it notes. And then I write down all my questions, and I put the verses to the questions. So for example, this week's study was unity. It would be, what is unity? What is the importance of unity? And I'd put down my Bible verses. The fact that Jesus prayed for unity, and as was brought out in the Sabbath school, his last prayer, it was massive important. What makes it so important? Why was it so important? And I put down all the verses I can find against that. What does the Bible say about us being the body, about a building? What does that actually mean? What are the Bible examples that we can find that back up anything we have to say? And were they perfect? And no, they weren't ever. They weren't ever perfect. And that I find very encouraging. How did they get unity? How do we get unity? What does the Bible say about how we should strive to live, how we should treat each other? Is this a salvational topic? And then most important of all, what we try to bring out is, what does what we're studying have to say about who God is? How does this paint the picture of God? What do we see that's new and different about a God of love? And we try and back it up as much as possible with biblical verses. As Mark was pointing out, there's always people who won't speak. And then there are a group of talkers. When the Sabbath school has the group of talkers in for that Sabbath, we don't get through a fifth of the Sabbath school lesson. It's just talking. When there aren't so many talkers, we probably get through a third. What else? What I find helps me, breaking it out this way, is if we start up here and someone talks about something else, I can forget everything that's written there and we can go to the bit about the something else. So you can flow with the conversations, but this way at least I feel prepared. I feel like I am not going to be thrown to the sharks and someone's going to make a comment and I'm going to go, I have no idea. In the end of the day, if you have no idea, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. Someone said to me, I can't remember who it was anymore, people will respect you more for saying, I actually have no idea, let me look it up. Or you look it up and we'll research this together, rather than just waffling off something I think, and the chances are I'm going to be wrong anyway. So I don't know, hopefully those help for anyone who is nervous and does want a little bit more extra information. Google it. If you just Google Sabbath School study, you will probably find 30 people who take the Sabbath School on YouTube, so you're watching, you're not just listening. It's way easier to watch someone than to just listen. But those are my favorites. So yeah, hopefully that helped.
All right, my topic is how to effectively interact with the Bible in a group setting. And the question I want to ask first is, how much time do we have with the Bible in our classes? How much time do we have for the Bible in our classes? It is easy, very easy, to come to the Sabbath School class and just, go around the topics and so on and never open the Bible. Very easy. And that is where we need to be very careful. How much time do we interact? It is called Bible Study Guide. But when we come to the class and we do not open the Bible, then we may be doing ourselves sometime disservice. And the small groups are made in a way that you are to be developing and having some deep-rooted relationships with God and with each other, like Ian said. First, I have to have a relationship with God, reading the Bible, and then my relationship is being translated with other people who are in a class so that we also have that relationship. I just want to share this thing with you. And where I come from, in our Sabbath School class, we have the teacher, which I call facilitator or discussion leader. We have somebody who we keep in charge of caring, such that if there's a member that is not there, we take notes. And within the week, we can actually say, hey, we didn't see you in class this week. Where are you? Where did you go? And so on. So, very good idea. And sometimes we even commission some people to go ahead and probably give some phone call to the people so that we know that they are there. So, this way, do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Do not let this book, and that is the Bible. When we come to the class, we may have prepared as teachers, very well prepared, but how much do our class members know of this? And when we come and we just, we are prepared and our class members are not prepared, and like I also noted in this presentation, there are many who come to class, they have not read the Bible, even the lesson for the week, and they depend upon what they were going to get in class. So if we just blow it, discuss it and so on and just go over it without even a Bible portion for that day, then probably we must be asking ourselves some questions, what we are doing. So how do we do it? The Bible should be the center of activities. The teacher as discussion leader, member participate, and then we discuss, like in math class and other classes too. And because all of that discussion has to, the Bible has to be the center. Now, in doing that, link the learner's experiences to the central concept of the lesson to show how the lesson is relevant to their lives. Today, we're talking about unity and so on. How does this play in our lives? And like the question I asked in our class, can we be united in the Sabbath school and be disunited even outside the Sabbath school? We come to the Sabbath school united, but can we also be united outside the Sabbath school? So, explore, present learners with the biblical information they need to understand the central concept of the lesson. And where do you get that? From the Bible. biblical information. And sometimes when I teach, I try to bring an overview of what the lesson is talking about. Then before we go into questions. Then provide learners the opportunities to practice what they have learned. And so that comes the idea of delegating people. We didn't see William in church today. Please, can you find out what is happening to William? Give me a phone call. Let's know. Okay. And maybe bond of unity. And then we can practice what we have learned. Otherwise, it will just be book knowledge, come to the class, talk about it, go home, forget it. So it's very important that we learn this. And our Sabbath schools are, like what says this, our Sabbath schools are nothing less than Bible societies. And in the sacred work of teaching the truths of God's word, they can accomplish far more than they have hitherto accomplished. The Sabbath school, when rightly managed, possesses marvelous power and is adapted to doing a great work, but it is not now what it may and should be. When I read this, it drives me, to find out the Sabbath school is not now what it should be. It's a community. It's a mini church. It's a family. And then we care for each other. And all these things are supposed to be in the Sabbath school. Now, the influence growing out of Sabbath school work should improve and enlarge the church. There is a most precious missionary field in the Sabbath school. And if there are now omens of good things, in fact, that one you can't see it. Where I come from, we call it Action Unit, between 8 and 16. And in Action Unit, we visit ourselves. We have Bible study together, even outside the church. And when we have evangelism coming up, we prepare the church so that each unit goes out to canvas, to go do their own personal evangelism. Before the big pastoral evangelism comes up, we have got some people that we are going to visit and say, hey, come to the church. This is coming up. So that is done within the Sabbath school. So each Sabbath school unit has to be a unit that will be inviting people that will come to the church. Now, the study of the Bible is incredibly important and essential in the Sabbath school study group. Members learn to grow in their walk with Christ through the Bible. Members learn to grow with Christ through the Bible. Never assume that all who come to Sabbath school each week have read the Bible and their lessons for the week. Study the Bible with members and questions should link to Bible texts. So, it is possible, and I've also seen it. When we ask questions, some will bring out the remote things they know about it. And they can go from here. I mean, it's not out of place for the teacher to say, this is outside the lesson of this week. Let's concentrate on this. Otherwise, you will just be flying here and there. And then before you know it, you've not covered anything. So it is very important that we still go back again to the Bible. And what one of my teachers told me, we call it systematic theology. We always ask, what does the Bible say about this topic? What does the Spirit of prophecy say about this topic? How can it apply to me? And how should I carry it out, even to apply to other people? And so we make disciples in the Sabbath school, and people are fed from what they learn. So the perusal of worship, of work upon our purpose work, reading of arguments from the pen of others, while an excellent and important practice, is not that which will give the mind the greatest strength. The Bible is the best book in the world for intellectual culture. The subjects treated upon in the Word of God, the dignified simplicity of its utterances, the grand themes which it presents to the mind, tend to develop in man faculties which cannot otherwise be developed. The student will come from different angles and still appreciate the Bible. So I ask the question to teachers and to myself, how much time do we spend in the Bible with our students? It is called Sabbath school. And what do you do in the school? You study. You have the textbook, you have the note. And I just finished a postgraduate diploma in education. And we are told that, you can't go to the class unprepared. And you can't go to the class and have nothing to share with your students. You can't go to the class also to tell students the stories that are just there in your head. So you have to be prepared to do a lot of things. And One of the hymn writers says, "Give me the Bible, star of gladness gleaming, to cheer the wanderer, lone and tempest tossed. No storm can hide that radiance peaceful beaming, since Jesus came to seek the lost." And it says, "Give me the Bible." That is what we have to give to our class people. Because with the Bible, they can be missionaries. This is what I've learned in the Sabbath school today. They can share it with others. But if throughout the Sabbath school class, no Bible is opened, we are just talking from the head and from experience and so on, then that's a big problem. So I challenge us to probably adopt this. There's no method that is very bad, but at least let's go back to the root. Every question must link to the Bible. And then let people read the Bible and out of it ask questions. And sometimes people have read the Bible at home, don't understand it, and they want to come to the class to really understand what the text of the Bible is talking about. And that's why we must go back to "Thus says the word of the Lord." Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon. It looks like I'm next. I hope my voice is coming through. That's one of my problems, particularly when I have a cold. People say I can't hear you. So if you want me to speak up more, please let me know. I found this great so far today. What about you? I think all of the speakers have had something, in fact lots, that we can learn from, and it's been interesting for me to see how other people go about teaching a class. You know, I've been teaching a class since a lot of you, long before many of you were ever born. and I've sort of heard myself teach a lot, but I haven't heard many others. I've taught in this church practically every Sabbath for well over 20 years. And okay, I've heard a lot of praise about Mark's class. I've never heard you teach, Mark. You probably haven't heard me. You have. Okay. So it's an eye-opener, it's a revelation to me to see how and to find out how other people go about doing things as well. But the topic I was asked to speak on was, of course, how I get ready to teach. And so that's what you'll be getting. Who knows what PP equals PP means? There's a little equation. PP equals PP. Well, it's a good try. Well, I think you're right on the track there. Poor preparation equals poor performance. So preparation is key to preparing to teach. But it can also mean something else. Proper preparation gives you professional performance. And I'd like to add a third one. Prayerful preparation gives us powerful performance. And I believe we need to combine all three in preparing to communicate the Word of God. So what is properly prepared? If that's what we're aiming to be, properly prepared, what is it? What do you think? How do you know you're properly prepared? When you can understand? Yes, I think that's right. When you feel you understand it sufficiently to just talk about it? All right. Any other suggestions? I suspect there were.
Get to know your class as well as the topic and pray for them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think that's a pretty helpful comment as well. How I look at it is if I were preparing for an exam, and it's a little while since I did one, although surprisingly it's not all that long. Because in my profession we've needed to upgrade, and so it's not all that long since I've done some exams, not as recent as you, Evans, nor at that same level. But I guess the most advanced study I did was a course at the University of London, and I graduated, never went to London. It was all done by external study. And the University of London didn't provide any tuition. They just made arrangements with other universities. I actually did the exam in Melbourne, at Melbourne University. And it was a result of really 3-4 years study. It was a postgraduate degree. And you did all the exams at once at the end. You know, if you're doing a 3-year degree, you've got exams every year. This one, you did the finals in 5 or 6 topics. The culmination of, in my case, about 6 years study, because I was working full time. I got the tuition, did that externally as well. That came from Wolseley Hall in Oxford. And so there were tutors in Oxford that I communicated with to do these exams. And so I was getting feedback from them and giving me little tests and so on. And when that was finished, I rocked up to Melbourne University. We'd been living in New Guinea at the time. I went to Melbourne University and did the exams. And there was 5 3-hour exams. And you had to pass the lot. If you passed 4, if you wanted the degree, you'd have to go back and pass all 5 next year. So that's a good old English system. It was pretty tough. Apparently the stats were that 42% passed. Isn't that amazing? 42%. I was fortunate to be one of them. And I thought, well, how do I know if I'm well enough prepared to teach a class? By the way, these exams weren't the ones where you take your computer and your cell phone and your textbook with you. It wasn't an open book thing, it was a closed book. All you had was the questions and a piece of paper to write the answers. And I thought, well, I'm well enough prepared to teach a class if I feel I could pass an exam on that topic, a closed book exam. Or if I feel I can hold a discussion on it without referring to any notes and yet still stay true to the topic and bring out the key thoughts. Now, Lilani, your research would put you in that position. And I thought that was great. So how can I tell when I'm properly prepared? When I can discuss the topic cogently with my group without any notes at all. That doesn't mean I'm against notes, but I did find in my early days of public speaking that when I had copious notes, people saw the top of my head and I wasn't really communicating. And I found it's much better to communicate when you can look people in the eye and it can be conversational rather than a lecture. And so that's really what I'm aiming at. Do I know it well enough to go into a closed book exam? Well, we just covered that off. So how do I prepare? How do I get ready for that? Well, I think we need to know our stuff. So carefully read the quarterly. That's where I start anyway. I know I've sat in some classes where the Sabbath school topic might have been touched on at some point, but you wouldn't have recognised it if you'd studied the quarterly. Now, I believe a whole lot of work and effort goes into those quarterlies. They're very, very carefully researched. They go right around the world. They're looked at people in all of our universities. And we have an absolute treasure in those. And I believe we often undervalue them. And people think they can go do something else during Sabbath school time and disregard what's in that quarterly. And that's questionable in my mind because of the quality of the material that we have there. I like to underline or highlight various bits that I find as I'm going through. I look up every text. Every text. Now, it's a lot easier with computers because I simply go to SSNet and you've got the whole thing there in front of you and you click on the text and up they come. So you can do the whole thing on your computer, and I'll have my lesson pamphlet alongside me, and I'll write down questions or comments or so on as I go. And then going through that process, because you can't really use all of the text in your discussion, I identify the ones that I would like to read in class or have members of the class read. And when we do that, I like to have more than one version. You know, some people are very keen on King James, and others want the New International and New King James and so on. And I'm not one of those people who has a very firm conviction that one translation is better than another. I guess I've done enough of trying to translate to know that one isn't any better than the others. They all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses, and what the translator is doing anyway is taking ideas from one language and writing them in his or her own words in another language. So they're picking up the thoughts. If you just try to translate exactly word for word from one language to another, it'd be practically unreadable. And so there is no one translation that is superior to the others in my mind. But I like to get the thoughts that come through from the different translations, because you have scholars and godly people in most cases, I'm sure, who have looked at the original language, looked at a text and said, that text says this to me, and written that thought in English. And I think it's important to get that variety. All right, so clarify the message. And this is very much in line with what Mark was saying. What is the key issue here? What is it on about anyway? Because I'm going to discuss it, I need to know what I'm talking about. Not just a whole lot of facts and figures and so on, but I need to know what the message is. So what message or what aspect of that do I want to convey? And so I will identify that in my mind, and there might be several key points that I want to come through in the discussion. And so in some ways I will ask questions that will sort of get an answer that'll take us down that track. But the answers I get may not necessarily be the ones I want. That doesn't matter, because they're the thoughts of the people in the group. And they may have thought of things that I haven't. And not maybe, they will have. Invariably that happens. And that's great, because now we're learning from each other. We're interacting with each other. We have a conversation going on with the group that we're working with. And I feel that's very important. What outcomes are we seeking? And that's very similar. What do we want people to go away from this meeting thinking? Do we want to think that was just a waste of time? Or do I want people to go away from here feeling better about themselves, better about each other, understanding some point of doctrine, understanding some thing that perhaps should be changing in their lives, understanding the love of God better, and always feeling grateful for the gospel. And caution, it's a discussion, so don't be too prescriptive. And I think this is a bit similar to what you were saying as well, Mark. It is a discussion, and I want it to be a discussion. One of the things that I do in my preparation, and thank you, Leilani, for that list of websites, I certainly tune into Doug Batchelor whenever I can. And that's not because I want to emulate what he does. Frankly, I don't. I don't believe that's the way to teach Sabbath school lesson. That's a lecture. And the only interaction there is occasionally somebody reads a text. And there's no discussion. That's not the way to teach a lesson. But there are some ideas in that I consider helpful and can always learn from him. So, I don't want to sound critical of Doug Batchelor. Far be it from me to criticise him. And the nature of the audience and what he's doing, I think, is highly commendable, and I'm one of the people who benefit from it regularly. But it's not the way I want to teach my class. Allowing for an exchange of ideas, I think, is very, very important in this environment. and also to get different opinions from people. We don't all think the same. We're not all photocopies of each other, not even doctrinally. And as we discussed this morning, that was not the case even in the early church. Right? They started out in unity and we focused on unity. Unity with a great big purpose, yes. Unity on the big picture. But some of the smaller issues, no, they had lots of divisions, lots of issues to deal with. They were not all thinking along the same lines. When you consider the issues of, there was tongues and food offered to idols, circumcision. These were big debates that raged in the very early church. There were Jewish people coming to grips with the fact that, well, there was something much bigger than what they had been brought up with. But many of them found it very difficult to discard some of what they'd been brought up with. And so they had a unity in the sense of a big purpose. All right? So don't condemn new or different ideas. Somebody in the group comes up with an idea, and you may think, well, yeah, that's a bit old school, or maybe that's a bit new school, or whatever. Never condemn, I don't believe we should. And we should discuss different concepts, I believe, fairly. So allow for the thoughts and the opinions and the ideas of others. At least they're the kind of things I try to achieve. Then I want to organise the message, and I'll go more quickly on this, but there are really only 3 bits: there's the beginning, the middle, and the end. And how do you sum that up? Well, you'd know, wouldn't you? Beginning, tell them what you're going to tell them. Middle, tell them. And the end, tell them what you told them. Right? That's it, isn't it? Yeah, right. What is it? Stand up, speak up, and shut up. And so the structure is basically quite simple. But I think it is important to stay on message, and that's not always so simple, to steer away from red herrings. And things can come up in a class that will say, well, if we got into that, we might miss the main point here. And I think we're all guilty of that at times. And those of you who have been in my group will say, oh, he better be careful here. Because we can all be dragged away from it, but I do believe it's something to avoid. Look for ways to apply comments. What are we saying here? Look for ways to apply comments to the message. Yeah, people's comments. What people are saying, even if it is a bit off message, look for ways to bring it back on. And allow new, unexpected ideas relevant to your message to develop. And let's see, we're nearly finished. Questions. There are 2 kinds of questions. There are closed questions and open ones. Who knows the difference? Mark certainly does. Who'd like to give us an answer? Yeah. That's a closed one, isn't it? So where the question can be answered yes or no, it's a nightmare for interviewers. If you watch somebody interviewing a politician or whatever on TV, asks a question and gets an answer no or yes. So the skill is to try to couch your question in such a way that it prompts an explanation rather than just a straight yes or no. And that can stimulate discussion. And then there's the outtakes. What are people going to take away from this? And I've already commented on that. What thoughts do we want our participants to leave with? Ask participants what they will take away from the group today. And that's here endeth my lesson. Thank you.